rise, please. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. The special session of the District Court of Ramsey County is now open pursuant to adjournment. The Honorable Sarah Gruing presiding. You may be seated.
Thank you, Deputy Kleinsasser, for opening this special court session. Good afternoon, friends and family. I am Sarah Gruing, and I have the honor to serve as the Chief Judge here in the 2nd Judicial District, Ramsey County. On behalf of Assistant Chief Judge Kelly Olmstead and all of the judges and referees of the 2nd Judicial District, Ramsey County, I welcome you all to this special court session, and I thank you for attending. I also want to thank and acknowledge our special guests here today, including United States District Court Judges Mimi Wright and Leo Brisbois from the United States District Court, and Judge Flaskamp Hallbrooks, Judge Harris, Judge Bjorkman, Judge Bratvold, and Chief Judge Frisch from Minnesota's Court of Appeals. We are so very grateful to the Ramsey County Bar Association for their leadership and for appreciating and recognizing the importance of gathering in a special session and honoring those who so graciously served as lawyers and judges in service to the public and private sectors. Those who we remember today served in a variety of legal practices, but all worked to ensure their clients and the public had access to the courts. The judges and lawyers we honor and remember today led the way in the pursuit of a more just society. May their passion for justice inspire all of us to strive for excellence in our own legal endeavors. At this time next year, we will honor 2 judicial officers whose funerals we attended this week, Referee Williams and Judge Diamond. The Honorable Charles Williams was laid to rest on Monday. Referee Williams passed away at age 95 following an extraordinary legal career that included more than 2 decades as a family court referee here in Ramsey County. We will continue to honor Referee Williams' leadership as a judicial officer and community leader, and we will hope to emulate his life and his legacy. And a week ago today, we said our goodbyes to Judge Patrick Diamond, whose sudden and untimely passing leaves an immeasurable void on our bench and in the hearts of all who had the deep fortune of knowing him. A jurist's jurist in the truest sense, Judge Diamond embodied the highest ideals of justice and fairness and transparency. His unwavering commitment to the rule of law and his deep integrity earned him the respect of colleagues across the bench and bar. Last week's funeral service was both a beautiful and somber reminder of all that we have lost: an extraordinary judge, a moral compass, and a fierce advocate for truth. But Judge Diamond was more than his judicial brilliance. Like so many of the lawyers and judges that we are honoring here today, Judge Diamond was a mentor and a lifter of people. He guided hundreds of clerks and young attorneys, many of whom did not fit the traditional mold of what the world expected a lawyer to be. He saw potential where others saw difference, and in doing so, he changed lives. His legacy is not only in the opinions he wrote, but in the generations of legal minds he nurtured with compassion, clarity, and courage. We in the 2nd Judicial District will choose to follow his legacy in all of our words and actions. For today, we have an extraordinary list of attorneys to honor in this memorial service. The lawyers and judges we remember here today practiced law and interpreted the rule of law that touched the lives of so many people in a myriad of ways. Their backgrounds and practices were all very different, but there are some clear patterns in the people we honor here today. They all led fascinating personal and professional lives. They were all curious, lifelong learners, and they deeply loved this town, almost as much as they loved their families. Those we remember today understood that our profession is built and thrives on the relationships that we build and nourish. Lawyers must continue to be focused on building and maintaining strong relationships with their clients, with their colleagues, with court staff, and with the community, and accept that professionalism relies on the ability for us to connect with each other. Let us follow that example that came before us, a legacy of collegiality, trust, and respect. Let us continue to foster a human-centered approach to the practice of law. To the families, friends, and colleagues of those we remember today, I say that we are so sorry for your loss, and we wish you peace and hope that this memorial brings you comfort. And now I would like to welcome Mr. Andrew Rorvig, President of the Ramsey County Bar Association.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Ramsey County Bar Association and all members of the Ramsey County Bar, thank you for joining us here today for the 2025 Bar Memorial. To be certain, the Bar Memorial is bittersweet, and it's been an annual event for decades and decades. We gather in fellowship to honor the real loss that we feel at the passing of our beloved family, friends, colleagues, and jurists. And yet the heart of today's memorial lies in a celebration of life and their achievements, the legacy of their contributions they made to their clients, their communities, their families, and the state of Minnesota. There can be no question that our profession at times is a hard profession. There are challenges, sometimes physically, oftentimes emotionally, what draws on our time and sometimes affects our life balance. And we know so well that these challenges, these burdens, they are shared by you, family, and loved ones. So our memorial today is something more. It serves as a testament and a recognition to you, the parents, the spouses, the children, the close friends, the neighbors, the confidants, those of you who sustained and supported each of these attorneys who have passed in their careers and their passions. So on behalf of the Ramsey County Bar Association, I wish you peace in your loss. We hope that this today provides some small measure of comfort, knowing that together we stand with you in honoring your loved ones. And remembering the words of an old Quaker prayer that I've had pasted to my computer for almost 20 years. It says, "Life is eternal, love is immortal, and death is only a horizon, and a horizon is nothing more than the limit of our sight." So thank you. Our condolences on behalf of the association, and we at this time can begin the memorials, and we'll go through those in a serial fashion, so I invite the first presenter to come up and provide the first memorial. Thank you.
May it please the court, my name is Michael Black, and it is my privilege to offer the memorial for John Peter Alexis. John Alexis was born to Peter John and Calliope Alexis in Carlisle, Pennsylvania in October 1942. He was the first grandson in a proud family of Greeks that immigrated to America from villages outside Sparta. John graduated from John Harris High School in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where he was the only member of the wrestling team. Seeking a college with a real wrestling team, he traveled halfway across the country to attend Mankato State College, as it was known then. There he joined the TKE fraternity, became a nationally ranked All-American wrestler in 1965, and made many lifelong friends in the process. After college in 1966, he joined the Marines at the time of the Vietnam War. Upon returning home, he taught history in southern Minnesota for a few years. He held a number of degrees and then became an insurance claims adjuster while he worked his way through law school at William Mitchell, where he graduated in 1976. John was an accomplished trial lawyer for 25 years, appearing before the Supreme Court twice. He officed in St. Louis Park and then the Commerce Building in downtown St. Paul for several years. John met his wife Carol in 1982 when she came to his law office as a client. From the day from the day she walked into his office, he had his eyes on her. After her legal problems have been resolved, they went out. And after a long courtship, they were married in a big fat Greek wedding at St. George Greek Orthodox Church in St. Paul on August 25, 1991. He often told Carol that she couldn't be Greek unless she liked feta cheese. After all, he said, being Greek is a state of mind. John continued to seek knowledge his entire life, a voracious reader of history, having read hundreds of books. He had a great sense of humor and was quick-witted and with a distinctive laugh that was hard to forget. John had a lifelong love affair with the game of billiards, beginning at a young age when his father ran a pool hall in Harrisburg. He continued playing pool for the rest of his life, both for the love of the game and the love of going to Las Vegas with his pool buddies to play in tournaments. One year they placed third in the nation. John made lifelong friends through the sport of pool. He helped a lot of new players with their games, and he even played against the great Willie Mosconi at an exhibition at his father's business, the Olympic Billiard Academy in Harrisburg. While practicing law, John owned several pool halls, including Olympic Billiards in Hopkins, Master Billiards just off of Crosstown and Penn, and the Q Club in Maplewood. The last room he owned was Crown Billiards in Bloomington, which opened in 1994. Crown was like a second home to many players because John was fair, happy, and made everyone feel welcome. Crown was their cheers, and many of those that played there remained friends to this day. Crown closed abruptly in 2023 when it lost its lease. John impacted a lot of lives there, and there wasn't a dry eye in the place on the last night of business. John was always kind, considerate, and compassionate. He helped less fortunate people with their legal needs, even if he knew he wouldn't be paid. He worked as a guardian ad litem for many years, representing minors who had no one to speak for them in court. He was a man of conviction and not easily swayed. John and Carol loved traveling. They made numerous trips to Greece and also other countries in Europe, as well as numerous vacations in Mexico during Minnesota's long, harsh winters. In 2011, John and Carol adopted their daughter, Caroline Elena, when she was just 3 days old. John was retired at the time, and Carol was still working, so the responsibility of caring for this precious newborn baby fell into John's hands. He often called this one of the best experiences of his life. He loved Caroline dearly and often said how blessed he was to have the experience of becoming a father and loving someone so much. He would text her every morning with sweet, uplifting comments for the day and always included a declaration of how much he loved her. Like her father, Carolyn was an athlete and enjoys playing volleyball. All of John's life accomplishments pale in comparison to the highest achievement in his life, that of his family, wife Carol, and daughter Caroline. He never spoke of past achievements, only of them and how much he loved them. John always had a smile, but his smile was brighter when he spoke of his girls. John suffered from diabetes and had an underlying kidney condition that worsened during the last year of his life. When his condition worsened, he stayed at the Minnesota Veterans Home in Minneapolis, where he died in October 2024. John is survived by his wife of 33 years, Carol, his daughter Caroline Alina, and his 2 adult sisters, 3 brothers-in-law, 2 sisters-in-law, and many nieces and nephews and cousins. Respectfully submitted, Carol Alexis and Mike Black.
Colleagues, members of the public, Louis Joseph Barcher Jr. was born in September on October 19, 1940, to parents Genevieve, whose maiden name was O'Connell, and Louis Joseph Barcher Sr. He had 3 older sisters, Lois, Mary Genevieve, and Catherine Ann. As you can imagine, he was spoiled rotten. Louis married his high school sweetheart, Mary Alberg. Mary passed away from complications of juvenile diabetes after a pregnancy. The child that was born died in infancy. He cared for Mary until she died and never left her side. He married our mom, Patricia Wicca Brost. Louis and our family were neighbors on Portland Avenue in St. Paul, Minnesota. They married in 1975, and he took on a ready-made family of 5 children: my brother, Charles Brost, me, Joy Barcher, my sister, Susan Barcher Sanchez, my sister, Mary Barcher Geller, and Carl Barcher. He adopted the 4 youngest children that were minors and graciously took on all of the things that go along with raising 4 minor children, 4 minor children, 3 minor girls, and a young man. Catholic high school, braces, teaching us to drive, and suffering through all of the other teenage life problems which you can imagine. He also accepted several foreign exchange students and their extended families into our home, and thereby expanded our family to include Ana, Carla, and Fernando Arguello, and Azabe Aragawi. Our dad was married to our mom for almost 20 years. Our mom died from complications of ovarian cancer, and he cared for her in their home and never left her side until she died. He indulged all her wishes to try alternative medicine and to die in her home. 30 years ago, he married Molly O'Brien, another St. Paul native, and he was with her until he died in their home. Louis grew up in the shadow of the St. Paul Cathedral. He attended Cathedral Grade School and Cretin High School. He was friends in school with judges Mike Fetch and John Finley, and his cabal of Don Cosgrove, Mike Sherwin, Art Walsh, and David Trudeau. He went to school in St. Cloud for a while after high school, joined the service, and went to the Army Language School in Monterey, California. He studied Arabic and worked translating recorded conversations for the government. He loved to tell jokes in Arabic that none of us could understand. For his first career, he followed in his father's footsteps. Louis Sr. worked for what was then the Sewer Board and ran the wastewater treatment plant at Pig's Eye Island. Louis Jr., and everybody that grew up with him called him Joe, Also began working at what later became the Metropolitan Waste Control Commission until his retirement. He was involved in local politics, and until he died, he always wanted to know what was going on in St. Paul and in Ramsey County. Upon his retirement, he said that he followed in his daughter's footsteps and went to law school in his 50s. Being a lawyer was his second career, but before he could go to law school, he had to finish his undergraduate degree, which he did at Metro State. He worked for only a few years as a lawyer, just enough to pay off his student loans and supplement his income. He loved the legal profession and would be pleased to be honored among all of the important people that we are honoring today. And even though he no longer kept a license, he would never pass up the opportunity to write a scathing letter if someone asked him to write it. Although he endured many tragedies in his life, Louis loved life. He loved his friends, he loved his family, and he loved his home city, county, and state. He loved to golf. He loved to buy cheap little cars that we all thought were death traps, and he loved to drive them all over the country. He later enjoyed traveling with Molly to visit the convent where she had been a nun. He was cheap, and he bragged about it. He was cheap and bragged about it, and he loved music and played the guitar at all of our family gatherings. The Christmas caroling party will be remembered for many years to come. We all know that he loved us, and we will miss him. Rest in peace, Dad. Respectfully submitted, Joy Barcher.
Your Honor, judges and justices, may it please the court, I am Theodore Collins, here to speak about my father, Theodore Collins. Theodore Joseph Ted Collins was born May 3, 1932 in St. Paul, Minnesota. Surrounded by his family, Ted passed peacefully on September 7, 2024 at his home in Mendota Heights, age 92. Ted was a very proud St. Paul lawyer. Ted graduated Cretin High School, class of 1950. He graduated the St. Paul Seminary, class of 1955, without taking holy orders. He graduated magna cum laude from William Mitchell College of Law, now Mitchell-Hamlin. Ted was admitted to the Ramsey County Bar and the Minnesota Bar in 1960. Ted and my mother, Mary Jo Tierney, were married in St. Paul in 1962. She passed away in 1982. Ted worked at 3M Corporation as in-house counsel and at the St. Paul City Attorney's Office as a prosecutor. In 1966, with fellow prosecutor Sidney Abramson, Ted formed Collins and Abramson. For many years, Ted taught criminal law to St. Paul police cadets. In 1968, Ted lost election to the Minnesota legislature, his only political campaign. As a lawyer, Ted toiled for truth, not triumph. Two examples will illustrate. In 1972, bombs were dropped in the ladies' restroom of the Dayton's department store. One detonated, nearly killing a customer. After conviction, an elder St. Paul attorney who Ted knew only by name stopped Ted privately in the courthouse hallway. He slipped a $35 gold coin into Ted's hand. The colleague whispered approval of Ted's, quote, very capable prosecution. Ted framed the coin, and it was in his nightstand the day he died. Perhaps those were two men of rare metal during an antique age gone by. Or perhaps a vein of that rare metal runs deep in the women and men of the RCBA today. That same year, 2 St. Paul police officers answered a panic call to help a pregnant woman in the small hours of the morning. One officer knocked at the front door of the dark home. From across the street, an assassin shot the St. Paul police officer in the back with a hunting rifle. Ted lost the prosecution after suspected witness tampering. 40 years later, in 2010, that defendant contracted terminal cancer and confessed, subject of a book. The shooter and an accomplice, now grandparents, were convicted. The delayed justice for a St. Paul cop became the subject of that book. Ted quoted Sullen, "Justice, even if slow, is sure." In 1970, Sid Abramson was elevated to the bench, and Ted and his Cretan classmate Eugene Buckley formed what later became the St. Paul law firm of CBS&H. Over the next 6 decades, many of the most exceptional St. Paul attorneys and legal professionals were part of the CBS&H family. Ted was remembered for quoting Twain, "If you must eat a frog, best to do it first thing in the morning." Ted's work included countless trials as well as Supreme Court appearances. In 1980, for example, Ted appeared in Togstad v. Vesely et al., which established watershed legal malpractice principles for Minnesota. Ted served as the president of the Ramsey County Bar Association in 1976. He served as president of the Minnesota State Bar Association in 1982. He officially retired from practice in 1995, but labored on assiduously. Ted and Jean M. Dick were married in St. Paul on September 7, 1985. They were very happily married for 39 years and 1 day. Ted's highest professional honor was serving this bar. Ted listened more than he spoke. He contemplated more than he revealed. He looked for the best in everyone. He spoke a calm, apposite word, especially to those who were scared or struggling. Ted lives on in the clients he represented and the numberless lives he made better. Respectfully submitted, Theodore Collins, Jr.
May it please the court, my name is Patty Beck, and I'm here to share about my dad, Kim DeVoy. My dad passed away peacefully on August 23, 2024, after an 8-year battle with dementia. He had just celebrated his 83rd birthday a few weeks before, enjoying all the things in life that he loved the most: visits with my mom and siblings, his grandchildren, and his grandpuppies. Born in 1941, my dad was the oldest of 3 children. His family moved to Shakopee, Minnesota after his father, also a lawyer, passed away when my dad was very young. My dad was always proud to share that his father had graduated from Harvard Law School and was one of the youngest attorneys to ever argue a case before the U.S. Supreme Court. My dad grew up working at his family's newspaper, the Shakopee Valley News, from 6th grade until graduating from St. John's University in 1963. After college, he was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant in the U.S. Army Signal Corps, served on active duty in the Dominican Republic, and was honorably discharged in 1969. My dad attended law school at the University of Minnesota, where he was on law review, was named to the Order of the Coif, and graduated magna cum laude in 1972. Over the next 40 years, he had a distinguished law career working for multiple law firms, beginning with Oppenheimer, Wolf & Donnelly, Doherty, Rumble & Butler, and finally retiring from Lindquist & Vedum in 2012. My dad was a tax lawyer, and he focused his practice on federal income taxation of business entities and their owners, including corporate, individual, and joint venture tax planning. He was skilled in taxation of S corporations, LLCs, and partnerships, and tackled many other areas within the corporate tax realm. He was also selected to Best Lawyers in America from 1983 to 2012. He was a member of the MSBA tax section, serving as section chair and income tax committee chair in the 1980s. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that my dad was also a CPA and before graduating from law school, he received the Minnesota Society of CPA's Harold C. Utley Award for scoring first place in Minnesota on the November 1970 exam. Something that always stood out to me and my siblings was that even though our dad worked very hard and was very successful in his career, anytime we'd call him at the office, we'd say, "Hi, Dad, are you busy?" And he'd say, "I'm busy, but never too busy for you." And he meant it. To this day, I don't know how he did it, but he showed up at every single sporting event, choir concert, and extracurricular activity that my siblings and I were involved in. And with 4 kids, that's a lot of events. Apart from being a lawyer, he loved to travel. He took us on road trips to national parks, on trips to Mexico and to Europe, with his favorite being a trip to Ireland in 2010 to see where the Devoy family heritage began. I rarely recall him ever working on family vacations. And as I look back now, I can say that while he was committed to his work, he was utterly devoted to his family. He was married to my mom, Luz, for almost 45 years. They met at Oppenheimer and got to know each other playing duplicate bridge together. And after 9 short years, he finally got the courage to ask her out. And I'm so glad he did, because they built a beautiful life together. My dad was active in his community. He was involved in the Kiwanis Club of St. Paul, Shakopee Knights of Columbus, Mendota VFW, Mendeegan, and Sibley Area Youth Athletic Associations. He was instrumental in starting a girls' hockey league in Mendota Heights, which I grew up playing in, and where 2 of his granddaughters continue to play today. Speaking of sports, my dad was an enormous sports fan. He had season tickets to the Vikings, Twins, St. John's football, and he attended 3 Vikings Super Bowls and multiple Twins World Series games with my brothers. Later in life, his interest took a drastic change from sports to Hallmark Christmas movies. Once I discovered our mutual love of Hallmark, we set up a weekly movie night. My favorite part of this tradition was at the 20-minute mark of every movie, when the leads were predictably engaging in their first disagreement. He would turn to me and in a very serious tone ask, "Do you think they'll end up together?" He had a great sense of humor. I looked up to my dad my entire life. He's the reason I became a lawyer, because I wanted to be just like him. Although once I went to law school and took a class in tax law, I found out what he actually did, and I told him I would gladly do away with his entire practice area if it meant I didn't have to take the final exam. Needless to say, I did not follow in my dad's footsteps. Our paths never crossed professionally, apart from the day he moved my admission. But I didn't have to work with him to know that he left a mark on the legal community, his partners, and his clients. Anytime I meet someone who knew him, I hear what a smart, talented, and excellent lawyer he was. Even as I submitted information for today's session, Betsy Keys emailed me back sharing a story of how she and my dad spent time working together on a case where my dad's client was a bit on the challenging side. She described my dad as being very gracious, and that's just one more word I'll use to describe him. I loved my dad very much, and I'm so proud to be part of his legacy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honors. If it pleases the court. My name is Scott Borchert, and I'm here today with the privilege to present the memorial for the Honorable William Bill Maxwell Dixon. Bill was born on April 22nd, 1948, at the Boston Naval Hospital. He bounced around Navy bases for much of his childhood and attended Cornell and Dakota Wesleyan before finding his way to the Twin Cities when he was accepted at Hamline University School of Law, now Mitchell Hamline. Bill began his career as counsel to Hubbard Broadcasting, representing 3 television and 5 radio stations. Bill took a proactive approach, helping to create policies and procedures for appropriate legal review, and when needed, was effective in court as an advocate for reporters' rights under the First Amendment. Beginning in 1982, Bill served the state of Minnesota for over 30 years as an administrative law judge, adjudicating hundreds of labor cases with integrity and a knack for insightful questioning that got to the truth of the matter at hand. Bill found immense pride in the legal profession and the mission of advancing the accessibility of justice. Bill was known for his quick wit, terrible puns, and his love of crafting. He was only too happy to help fix a leaky toilet and showed his affection to his family, friends, and his 3 children with gifts of his woodworking. He was active in his community, serving on the synagogue building committee for Bet Shalom as his congregation moved to a new home in Minnetonka, and as a board member for his homeowners association. Bill retired in 2012 and spent his later years traveling, paddling around Minnesota's beautiful lakes in a wooden kayak he built himself, and enjoying single malt scotch. Respectfully submitted, Max Jabrixio and Scott Park-Borchardt.
May it please the court. Paige Donnelly was my teacher, my colleague, my friend, and my mentor in all things, and my dad. I would like to share some memories about him. He was born and raised on the fighting east side of St. Paul, just a day after St. Patrick's Day. And he loved to box and was still able to make the speed bag fly at 90 years old. He was a beloved husband, father, grandfather, and strong advocate and cherished member of the community. And he was just 1 week from turning 92 when he passed. He attended Cretan High School, then the prep for the seminary at Nazareth Hall, then University of St. Thomas, where he obtained an accounting degree, and then finally the University of Minnesota Law School. He was married for 60 years to my mom, Mary. They had 2 children, my brother Kevin and myself, 5 granddaughters, and family was the cornerstone of his life. His work interests varied over the years as an accounting and business law professor at the University of Minnesota, and then as an owner of his own personal injury law firm for 60 years, where he practiced for 60 years. Helping injured became one of his great passions. He received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Minnesota Association for Justice, and he was repeatedly named a super lawyer. I was blessed to have worked with him every day for 28 years. When I went to depositions and hearings, people would often say, "Your dad's a legend," and then they would tell me stories about how his humor would lighten the mood in court. One example was he was in trial, and there were cords on the floor, and he stumbled. He was 83 or 84 at the time, and he stumbled and tripped on them, and the judge said, "Mr. Donnelly, are you okay?" And he turned with a glint in his eye to the jury and said, "I'm like a cat," to which the entire courtroom broke out laughing. He deeply cared for each of his clients and left a lasting impact on those he represented and served. His spiritual life was deep. He considered a life in the priesthood before pursuing a career in law. His faith saw him through many obstacles in life, grounded him, and guided him in his actions and concerns for others. Beyond his professional achievements, my dad will be remembered for his infectious smile and his ability to bring joy to those around him. He lived in the moment with people and gave them his undivided attention. He used humor, often self-deprecating, to make people feel warm, welcome, and important. He had a deep connection with his family, clients, employees, and opposing counsel, and he had a bit of a sweet tooth, so all the workers at the food places around the firm in the Skyway knew him by name. He had a way of brightening the lives of those around him.
He relied on his Irish heritage in many ways, from faking an Irish brogue at a dance to meet my mom, to listening to Irish songs to help him prepare for trial, and for decades his firm was a staple in the St. Patrick's Day Parade. His legacy of love, laughter, and kindness will continue to live on in the hearts of his family and the clients who he touched by his kindness. His attitude was always to look for the best in every situation and in every person. He loved trial. He loved the challenge, he loved the strategy, and most of all, he loved helping somebody who desperately needed help and protection. He was the greatest example of kindness and strength I have ever or will ever know. There is a quote that man who lived well, that man is a success who lived well, laughed often, loved much, and left the world better than he found it. And my dad did all of those things, and he left our lives better by his daily example of the kindness and strength with which he lived. Respectfully submitted.
Good afternoon, members of the court and the public. My name is Mike Burke, and I am here today to present this memorial on behalf of C. Peter Erlander, who was the father of Sarah Erlander, and I'm going to read what Sarah wrote about her dad. My dad, C. Peter Erlander, was born on the south side of Chicago on April 14, 1948. He graduated from Calumet High School and Bradley University before beginning law school at Georgetown University. He returned home to Chicago to operate Erlander Manufacturing, designing and building truck bodies after his father's death. Dad later completed law school as a night student at Chicago Kent and began teaching a fellowship at the University of Chicago. In 1983, we moved to St. Paul for a faculty position at William Mitchell, now Mitchell Hamlin. My dad taught thousands of future lawyers there for close to 30 years. Through his teaching, from large civil procedure and criminal procedure first-year classes to smaller seminars, my dad left an enormous impact on the legal community in Minnesota and around the world. In addition to teaching, my dad always had many irons in the fire. One of my core childhood memories was my dad looking for a FedEx. His projects were legal and political. He stood for the underdogs and the less powerful. He sided with death row inmates and indigenous tribes, with those accused of genocide and sex offenses. My dad aligned himself with Vietnam veterans grappling with PTSD and prison inmates seeking appropriate hepatitis C treatment. He was against imperialism, fascism, and capitalism. The subject of his work was both deep and varied. The common theme was that he took David's side against Goliath. Dad was active in the National Lawyers Guild and served as president of the organization from 1993 to 1997. He worked extensively internationally in Japan, Cuba, France, Colombia, Peru, and elsewhere, finding common cause and colleagues throughout the world. From 2003 to 2011, my dad served as defense counsel at the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. His work there caused his arrest and month-long detention in Kigali in 2010. An international campaign of organizing and political pressure culminated in his release on bail. In between hunting for FedExes, he volunteered weekly at my elementary school and quizzed me on spelling words over broccoli and chronically charred chicken on Thursday nights. He taught me to see the dignity and humanity in every person, and that I have an obligation to use my skills and voice to make the world more fair. There's a straight line between my dad and these values and my own career as a public defender. He was so very proud of me, and what a gift that he made. Sure, I knew it. My dad was married in partnership with Masako Yusui for 23 years. Their life together was an adventure. My dad died on December 4, 2024, in St. Paul, Minnesota, in the Cathedral Hill home he renovated from the studs and had lived in since 1991. In addition to Masako and myself, my dad is survived by his brother Scott Erlander, his son-in-law Charlie Doty, and his grandchildren Caleb and Zeke Doty, as well as friends and compatriots around the world. Respectfully submitted by Sarah Erlander, on behalf of her father, C. Peter Erlander.
May it please the court. I am Rick Wilhoit, and I'm here to give a memorial for my partner, former law partner, Henry D. Flash, commonly known as Hank Flash. Hank was born on September 17, 1927, and raised on a farm in Lidgerwood, North Dakota, a small town in the southeast portion of the state. He died on January 8th of this year. He was the son of Henry George Flash and Anna Arth. He graduated from high school in Lidgerton. As a young man, he had aspirations of becoming a pilot and not a farmer. He knew he could not afford college, but a stint in the military could qualify him for the GI Bill. This was 1946, and the U.S. military did not need pilots. Thus, he was trained to be a water purification technician. But as fate would have it, he was sent to Guam. Instead of going to Guam, the Air Force asked him if he could type. He said he could type. And he answered in the affirmative, and which resulted in him spending a little over 2 years as a company clerk at a base outside of Tokyo, Japan. After his military service, Hank returned stateside, and in the fall of 1949, he enrolled as a pre-law student at the College of St. Thomas, now known as the University of St. Thomas. He used his GI Bill benefits for that educational expense. After 3 years at St. Thomas, he enrolled at the University of North Dakota Law School. He chose this law school because he thought if he was going to practice law, it would probably be better to go to law school in North Dakota. But once again, fate intervened. Father James Lavin, University of St. Thomas faculty member who had befriended him, suggested that Hank return to St. Paul and attend the St. Paul College of Law, and Father Lavin would assist him in finding a job. This he did. Hank was hired by William Mitchell, grandson of William Mitchell of the Minnesota Supreme Court fame, as a law clerk at the firm of Doherty, Rumble, and Butler. His GI Bill benefits were sufficient to pay all of his education costs for the first 2 years of law school. However, he did not have enough funds for the last year, so the St. Paul College of Law waived his tuition for the last year. While at St. Thomas, he met Mary Ann Hunn, a student at the College of St. Catherine. They were married in 1952. They had 2 children, Mark and Barbara. After being admitted to the Minnesota Bar, Henry was employed as a lawyer at the practice of law at Doherty, Rumble, and Butler. His primary practice areas were probate, guardianships, and real estate. At this time, the Lewis W. Hill Jr., a client of Doherty, Rumble, and Butler, purchased the James J. Hill Farm located in what is now known as the city of North Oaks. He purchased it from his 3 siblings. The 4 children had inherited it from their father, Lewis W. Hill Sr., who died in 1948. Mr. Hill wanted to slowly develop this approximately 5,500 acre property into an exquisite gated community with a golf course, which has been done. In the early 1950s, Mr. Hill retained outside planning consultants, and the resulting overall development plans piggybacked on that with the rules, restrictions, and covenants of the Tony community of Grosse Pointe, Michigan. Generally, this development only provided or made available 20 lots per year for purchase and development. Henry was Mr. Hill's lawyer. He shepherded the legal work involved with this large project. As the community grew, the landowner, Mr. Hill, and thus his lawyer, had interactions with St. Paul Water Department, which receives and still does receive some of the city's water from Pleasant Lake, and the North Oaks Homeowners Association, the city of North Oaks and its governmental entity, other neighboring communities, as well as the state of Minnesota and the U.S. Corps of Engineers. This development provided Hank with much of his legal practice throughout his career until his retirement in 1989. Hank was known as a lawyer's lawyer when it came to real estate law matters. In memory of Hank, one of his former law partners recently said of Hank that he had never witnessed anything but kindness in Hank's dealings with others. Being an attorney was not Henry's only entire life. His outside interests including pheasant hunting, which was natural for a fellow growing up on a North Dakota farm, photography, astronomy, and volunteering at his church and children's school. Hank's wife, Mary Ann, his wife of 51 years, died in 2003. He is survived by his daughter, Barbara Flash, his son, Mark Flash, their spouses, a granddaughter, and 3 step-granddaughters. Respectfully submitted by Barbara Flash, David Martin, and yours truly, Rick Wilhoit. Thank you.
Judge Gruig, may it please the court. As a public defender, I would be remiss if I did not mention before my remarks how nice it is to stand before so many well-known and friendly faces, and especially to thank you for not taking me and my elk into custody. Maybe I should be thanking the deputies here as well, as we scramble between the courtrooms on a daily basis to do our jobs. And also for remembering that those we represent didn't all have the loving and supportive parents like I am about to describe here. I am Kate Latimer Courtney, the fourth of George and Nancy's 5 children, and give this in memory of George Latimer, our dad. He was the youngest of 3 boys who grew up in Schenectady, New York, where his working-class family ran a neighborhood grocery store and deli called Latimer's. He had fond memories of his mother, Dolly, making potato salad in the back room of the store, George and his friends playing basketball at the Jewish Community Center, taking the train into the city alone as a young boy. About 9 years old, he hopped on a train to go watch the Yankees play baseball, never having to fight because of how tough his big brother Bill was. He attended St. Columba Grade School, where he served as an altar boy and always told us kids that fulfilled his lifetime obligation of going to church. He let Mom bring the kids to St. Luke's while he stayed home and blared the Italian opera alone. In the summer of '62, he came to St. Paul for an internship at Robbins, Davis & Lyons. He was recruited by managing partner and brilliant civil rights lawyer Ken Tilson. Before settling here, he was given instructions by Nancy, our mom, as they had been living in public housing in Harlem, with Nancy lugging strollers and groceries and kids through the city and up many stories, that she wanted him to find a place on the ground level with a big backyard and away from any busy streets. He reported back that he'd found a wonderful place. It had a gorgeous big living room. It would be great for entertaining. It was on the second story of a duplex off of Lexington Avenue, a busy street, no real backyard. Incidentally, just up the block from where Judge Barcher's family was. He worked as a labor lawyer with, among others, Ed Starr and Bill Malum. They were in the Commerce Building downtown. He served on the St. Paul School Board, became mayor of St. Paul in 1976, served for over 13 years. He also served as a regent at the University of Minnesota, dean of the Hamline University School of Law, undersecretary for Housing and Urban Development in the Clinton administration, chair of the National Equity Fund, president of the National League of Cities, distinguished professor at Macalester College, labor arbitrator, and a member of countless volunteer boards, including his beloved St. Paul Public Library. My dad was known for his big, warm, welcoming smile, contagious enthusiasm, sharp intellect, and wit. I'm remembering right now a letter that retired Judge Marinan sent to him not long before his death, where she had remembered fondly how he would walk into the courtroom, lighten the mood, and make everybody smile. And I can just picture that. Some of his favorite accomplishments were the development of the Hubert H. Humphrey Job Corps Center. That was a tough fight that he put up, and always knew that he was on the right side of that, has given so many people a better shot at a second chance in life. St. Paul's District Energy Heating, the Ordway Theater, and the welcoming of the Hmong community of immigrants who enriched our city by making St. Paul home, especially in the 70s and 80s. As a young labor lawyer, he once represented an African-American union worker in a workplace injury claim. The man so trusted my dad after representation that he asked him to represent him in adopting 2 young kids that he was fostering. My dad demurred, knowing nothing at all about family law and knowing better. He finally relented, however, because the man really didn't trust lawyers at all, and my dad knew he needed one. He appeared before the Honorable Archie Gingold, who heard the county oppose the adoption because the man and his wife just didn't have enough space. The kids would be sharing a bed. My dad has always known his audience, and he was very proud of knowing this at the time. Sensing a kindred spirit, he pled, "Some of us never knew our own bed until we left home as an adult." Judge Gingold heartily agreed and granted the adoption. Incidentally, years later, one of the grown kids tracked down my sister, his daughter, living in the Como neighborhood, knocked on her door and gave their thanks. In his life, my dad met with presidents, dignitaries, power brokers of all kinds, but he remained the one who, while all in his presence looked up to him, he looked down on no one. A friend of mine from the public defender's office, Tom Donahue, remarked that my dad was the greatest orator he had ever heard. I think he based that on a speech that my dad gave as the Whirlpool plant was closing, and Tommy had a relative who worked there. But he also indicated, having had arbitrations in front of my father, he said simply, he was for the working stiff. My dad would have found that the highest compliment of all. Respectfully submitted, Faith, George Jr., Philip, Kate, and Thomas Moore Latimer.
May it please the court, my name is Michael Black, and it is my privilege to offer the memorial for Richard Adrian Laverdiere, substituting for his surviving spouse, Lisa Laverdiere. Rick Laverdiere had a long and varied career as a trial lawyer in Minnesota. He was born in Lewiston, Maine, where he attended school and then the University of Maine. He enlisted in the United States Navy, where he trained as a Navy pilot. He had a long-standing dream of becoming a lawyer, and after being discharged from military service, he started looking for a law school where he could work while going to class. He said he discovered William Mitchell School of Law in St. Paul when a course catalog from the school fell from a library shelf and landed on his head while he was searching for schools. Fate had spoken to him, and he followed its advice. During his years in law school, he worked at the Mahoney Law Firm during the day and attended classes at night. After graduating, he joined the legal department at St. Paul Companies, where he was part of a defense team, then tried hundreds of cases. His background and heart told him that he was more suited to representing victims, so he took a position representing plaintiffs at the Hertogs-Flegel firm in Hastings, now known as Sieben Polk. There, Rick was a fierce advocate for his clients and practiced law with great integrity, brilliance, and vigilance. He took great pride in being an attorney and in being a partner in the firm. He was a loyal colleague to his co-workers. He received recognition and many honors during his legal career of over 40 years. He was former president of the Minnesota Trial Lawyers Association. He was certified in civil trial advocacy by the National Board of Trial Advocacy, was named one of the top 100 trial lawyers for several years by the American Trial Lawyers Association, was named a super lawyer in Minnesota for several years in a row, and also one of the best lawyers in America. Rick had many interests and talents. He created and built 3 beautiful homes, loved to ski, especially out west, and he was a die-hard hockey fan. He served as a youth hockey coach and played in amateur leagues for many years. Rick had a great interest in cars, especially Porsches, and one of the great loves of his life was his convertible Porsche Iris. He was a former president of the Nordstern Porsche Club and participated in Porsche racing and drivers' education events around the country. He loved the outdoors, animals, and wildlife, and loved living in the country and taking care of his rural property, which he did with the same dedication and attention to detail that he brought to all of his endeavors. Rick loved to travel and had a special love of Hawaii. He was proud of his French and French-Canadian heritage, and one of the highlights of his life was the opportunity to visit France and Paris, where he and his wife Lisa became engaged. He was a sophisticated gentleman who loved fine dining and had an appreciation for the arts, music, and reading. He hoped to study the French language after his retirement. While there were many dreams left unfulfilled, having been cut short due to his relentless disease, Rich lived a full life of accomplishment, integrity, contributions, and the love of family and his friends. He leaves a legacy of kindness, honor, and generosity that will forever live in the hearts of those who are lucky enough to know him. Rick was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia and suffered through the cruel progression of that disease until his death in 2024. Rick is survived by his loving wife, Lisa, formerly Lisa Mikuleff, also a former trial lawyer, his dear sons, Christoph and Michelle, and his daughter-in-law, Victoria, all who live in the Seattle-Tacoma area. He also has surviving sisters and his former wife, Linda, the mother of his sons, and has several beloved grandchildren, mother-in-law, father-in-law, and others who welcomed him into the warm embrace of their family. Respectfully submitted, Lisa Leverdier and Mike Black.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to friends and family of those we are lucky enough to know and honor here today. My name is Tim Carey, and it is my honor to present on behalf of the Linden family in honor of James Stewart Linden, born March 1st, 1943. Jim was born in San Mateo, California, to John Ross Linden Jr. and Madeline Spike Linden. His parents moved the family several times, and they eventually landed in Edina. Jim was a student at Edina High School and graduated in 1960, but then he returned to California to attend Stanford University. After 4 years in the West Coast sun, Jim returned to the Midwest to attend law school at the University of Minnesota and to start his family. After obtaining his law degree in 1967, he joined the bar in 1968 and began his practice with the Stringer, Courtney, and Rolliter firm in St. Paul. Jim and his young family also put down roots in the Ramsey Hill neighborhood, where he quickly went to work in helping this unique area recover from decades of decline. As the first president of the Ramsey Hill Association and president of Old Town Restorations, Jim used his expertise in real estate law to facilitate the conversion of many turn-of-the-19th century apartment flats into condominiums. This field of work would become his specialty until his retirement. In 1975, he served as city attorney for Arden Hills until 1988. Always drawn back to California, Jim moved back briefly in 1988, but then returned home to Minnesota in 1989 to resume his legal practice. Jim was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2006, but he lived life to the fullest right up to the end. He loved travel, and he loved stories of synchronicity. He was a recovered alcoholic at the time of his death, with 44 years of continuous sobriety and the knowledge that he helped hundreds of people get on the path of recovery. Respectfully submitted, Tim Carey.
Judge Gruing and esteemed jurists, I'm John Malone, brother of Bob Malone, and I'm here with members of Bob's family. I would like to extend a thank you to Mike Burke for telling us about the RCBA Memorial Service. Mike was an earlier presenter here today and a member of the committee. Bob was born in 1952, the third of 6 children of Richard and Elizabeth Malone. At that time, our dad was in the process of going out on his own in the practice of law, serving our country in World War II. After having served our country in World War II, my dad became friends with a who's who of St. Paul attorneys. Names like Ed Donahue, Jill Brevard, and Judge Edward Devitt come to mind. These are wonderful people, born in the 1910s and 1920s. They were friends to my father, and they became mentors to my brother, Bob. Bob then had a next generation of mentors as well. People like Joe Friedberg, Ron Meschbecher, Doug Thompson. The list is long and storied. As I reflect back, it is not hard to see why Bob enjoyed and excelled at the practice of law with the intensity that he did. These mentors showed Bob the path to be both a zealous advocate and a trusted opponent, a lawyer who had tremendous respect for judges, juries, prosecutors, and the process, but to fear no one and to back down, never. As noted by Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, none of us got where we are solely by pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. We got here because somebody, a parent, a teacher, an Ivy League crony, or a few nuns bent down and helped us pick up our boots. Bob was truly grateful for the mentorship he received. Bob eventually reached the top tier of criminal defense attorneys in the Twin Cities, and with that came much pure respect and recognition. He became one of the premier criminal defense attorneys in the Twin Cities, enjoying years of success in both federal and state courtrooms. His clients' rights and freedoms were not bargaining chips, they were a birthright, was Bob's philosophy. Bob was invited to join the Minnesota Society for Criminal Justice, an organization limited to 50 lawyers, and served as president of the society in 2000. He was also honored by the Minnesota Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers in 2015 by being awarded its Profile and Courage Award. This peer recognition meant a great deal to Bob. At his funeral at the Assumption, presided over by Father John Malone, this is not an unusual way for a St. Paul Irish attorney to go out, by the way. Bob went to Archbishop Brady High School in West St. Paul. He would have gone to Cretin like 10 other people here today, but Archbishop Brady, he was a member of the second graduating class. But it was just a beautiful ceremony, spoke very eloquently by his daughter Laura and his daughter Caitlin, and it was just a real testament to Bob. And his daughter spoke very eloquently and very beautifully about the role that he played in their lives. This was a funeral attended by hundreds, including many criminal defense attorneys, friends going back as far as high school, and about 20 cousins. Again, not unusual for an Irish attorney from St. Paul. Bob was a friend and a mentor and almost a mythic-like figure to me, his younger brother who followed in his footprints in our vocation, our schooling, our love of politics, and about 20 other things. On my first day attending law school, he gave me a letter with some advice. I don't have the written copy of the letter anymore, but I don't need it. It was brilliant, and it was simple, and it was direct. That was Bob. It wasn't full of esoteric language or flowery language. It was hard-edged, it was practical, and it was brilliant. His wit was unmatched. I smiled when I thought about writing down Bob was a lawyer's lawyer, because at one of our last lunches together, he said, you know, John, we were talking about Shakespeare. And he goes, you know, John, the only problem I got with Shakespeare is he used too many cliches. And I had to think about that for a minute, and then I saw the twinkle in his eye, and then I got the joke. Thank you to the Ramsey County Bar Association and to the Memorial Committee for hosting this event. St. Paul and Ramsey County is where it all started for Bob in the practice of law, and it is so fitting that his final memorial can be here today as well. I've practiced law for 40 years, and I can honestly say I have never met anyone who enjoyed being a lawyer more than Bob Malone. He loved everything about it, especially not guilty verdicts. Bob was a lawyer's lawyer. It was and is a match made in heaven.
Family and guests, may it please the court. My name is Al Woodward. I'm here for present the memorial for my best friend, Garrett Mulrooney, known as Gar to everyone that came in contact with him. Gar passed away peacefully with family at his side on December 22 of 2024. Christmas time, a fitting time to leave the family that was the center of his life. Gar was born in Mankato, Minnesota on September 26, 1941. He and I met while attending St. John's University, where we graduated in 1963. We were also roommates during our first year in law school at the University of Minnesota. And we shared many a cold walk between Dinkytown and Old Fraser Hall. Between our second and third year of law school, we clerked at the St. Paul law firm of Mon Hazel, Greenhays, Simon, and Arts. Thankfully, later shortened to Mon and Simon, where we practiced together for over 30 years. Gar and I graduated from the University of Minnesota Law School in May of 1966, and by that time we were newly minted fathers. As Gar was an ROTC graduate from St. John's, he was immediately called to active duty and assigned to the U.S. 4th Armored Division near Nuremberg, Germany, where he, his wife Diane, and daughter Peggy lived for the next 2 years. Gar's 6-foot frame didn't fit well within a tank, so the company commander decided to make him his chief of staff, where his primary responsibility was to ease tensions between the U.S. soldiers and the local authorities. This was not an easy task. Gar completed his tour of service and returned to St. Paul as a captain with his family and now 2 children in 1968, where he rejoined the Mon and Simon firm. Gar practiced law with the firm for his entire career, retiring in 1995. Gar was a litigator. He specializes in insurance defense work, where he developed a particular expertise in fire cases. He understood the vicissitudes of litigation, and he took great pride in evaluating and settling cases. Gar was first and foremost devoted to his family and his community. He served as a trustee of the St. Peter's Catholic Church in Mendota and was a volunteer at each of the schools attended by his children. He was also an ardent alum of St. John's, where he served on the National Alumni Board. However, he was most proud of mentoring at-risk young boys at Ramsey County's Totem Town, where he volunteered for many years. He was unwavering in his belief that the young boys he mentored and had potential to change their lives and achieve their dreams, and he continued to keep in touch with them long after they left Totem Town. In 1978, Gar and I acquired a condo on Lake Owen near Cable and Telemark, Wisconsin, which our family shared for several years until we were able to acquire the unit next door and split our ownership between the 2 families. We continue to own those 2 units to this day, and in many respects have spent our time at the lake as one extended family. Gar was the camp director. He was the fireside music director, the ski boat captain, and the snowmobile leader. Seldom without a song, a guitar, or a piano, Gar was the life of the party for the entire family. In 2002, Gar's beloved wife, Diane, lost her long-term battle with cancer. The loss of Diane had a profound effect on Gar, but nevertheless, he remained the center of his family. Gar is survived by his 5 children, Peggy, Garrett, who is now a professor here at William Hamlin College of Law and an adjunct at the University of Minnesota, his twins Patrick and Mark, Katie, 12 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. Respectfully submitted by his friend and partner, Al Woodward.
Bonjour, Nij Bimadet Zig. Greetings, my fellow human beings. I'm Judge Leo Brisboy of the United States District Court for the District of Minnesota, and I'm a member of the White Earth Ojibwe community. Miigwech, thank you for the honor of being asked today to make a few remarks on behalf of retired Minnesota Court of Appeals Judge R.A. Jim Randall. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank retired Minnesota Court of Appeals Chief Judge Edward Toussaint and Mr. Tom Boyd of the Winthrop firm for taking the laboring oar on drafting but giving me the opportunity to review and make some comments and suggestions for content to the written formal professional memorial that will be included in the commemorative booklet that you'll receive following the ceremony today. Professionally, Judge Randall and I were judicial contemporaries. While he was still serving as a senior judge for the Court of Appeals, he spoke at my judicial investiture in Duluth on November 5th of 2010. Before that, he asked me to be one of his law clerks in 1990 to 1991 after I got off an overseas tour of active duty as a judge advocate prosecuting Krauts marshals for the United States Army Europe. Before that, I served as his intern in his chambers in the summer of 1986, leading up to my third year of law school. I'm not going to further recount at any length Judge Randall's professional life and accomplishments. They're eloquently put forward by Judge Toussaint and Mr. Boyd in the memorial that you're going to receive. And anyone who knew or interacted with Judge Randall in a professional capacity, they no doubt have their own very interesting and highly meaningful recollections of those encounters. Rather, I want to share a brief personal anecdote with all of you that I think speaks to the character of the man, whether you're private citizen, lawyer, or judge. I would, of course, like to begin the remainder of my remarks, however, by once again expressing my sincere condolences to all of Judge Randall's family, but most especially his children, Tony, James, and Kathleen, with whom I and my own brother and sister attended Hibbing High School together. And Hibbing High School is where the anecdote I want to relay has its beginning. I first met Jim Randall, who was then in private practice, in the fall of 1974 when I was a 13-year-old member of the Hibbing High School cross-country team. Jim paid out of his own pocket for the end-of-season banquet. He bought all of the trophies and awards for individual accomplishment for the team members that year, and donated that all out of his own pocket. At that time, back in 1974, I didn't understand the connection or the basis for his support, but I would later learn that following Frank Shorter's gold medal at the 1972 Olympics for the marathon in Munich, Jim developed an interest in long-distance running that would last the remainder of his lifetime. In fact, at one point, he even ran the Boston Marathon, and coincidentally, there was a photographer taking pictures, just anonymous pictures along the race course, and at one particular corner took a bunch of pictures, and one of those pictures ended up on the cover of the Boston Marathon feature edition for Runner's World magazine, 1974, and smack in the middle is Jim Randall coming around the corner. He had that framed and in his chambers so that it's the first thing you saw when you walked in. As a seventh grader, although I had never before been involved in distance running, that first year I had a bit of success, and I ended the season as the number 2 man on the 7-man varsity squad. And at the conclusion of the season in mid to late November, my coach told me, if you're going to reach your potential as a distance runner, you need to run year-round, including in the winter. Well, I grew up in Hibbing, Minnesota, and in the 1970s, mid-70s, winters were by no means as luxurious and mild as they have been the last few years. And my reaction was, run in the winter, how am I going to do that and not freeze to death? And my coach very succinctly said, go talk to Randall. So I made an appointment, and shortly after Thanksgiving, I went to meet with Jim, and not at his house. He told me to come, his office, but he told me to come to his house. And I arrived there one evening, and for what I thought was going to be a very brief visit where I'd get some basic tips on winter running and then quickly be on my way. And as I would come to learn about Jim, and which I very much came to enjoy, there's rarely anything brief when you were discussing something that Jim was passionate about. My anticipated quick visit became one of a couple hours. During the course of that visit, we discussed in great depth concepts of, techniques of, and equipment needed for long-distance running training through the winter. Also during that visit, since it was taking some time, there was a great deal of food and beverages provided. Although much later in life I would on occasion share a glass of scotch with Jim, I can assure you that in 1974 the drinks were age appropriate. When I finally left Jim's home that evening, I not only had the benefit of our detailed conversation, but out of his personal library, I walked out with 5 books in my hand, hard-covered books, on the subject of winter running. And you know, he never asked me to return those books. In my first one-on-one encounter with Jim in 1974, I saw and would see again many times over the following decades of our personal and professional relationship Jim's passion for things that he was interested in and loved, but more importantly, I saw his unbridled generosity. The defining aspect of Jim's innate character, in my view, was always and always remained his willingness to do whatever he could, whenever he could, for whomever he could, when asked for assistance. And just like he never asked me to return any of those books in 1974, he helped countless others over his entire lifetime out of his own personal resources without ever asking for anything or expecting anything in return. With Jim, there was no quid pro quo. Rather, the generosity always flowed in one direction only, and that was always outward. As I mentioned earlier, Judge Randall spoke at my own judicial investiture, and at the close of his remarks, as I was beginning my new life as a judicial officer, he then said to me what I would like to say to him now as he approaches the end of his year-long journey crossing over to the other side. Nitawis ninga eshi dana dinashi bimoisen. May the Creator walk with you, my brother. Gigawa min menwa niji miomenik wakadoyen nugum egwich bizindawiyeg. See you again, my friend. That is all I'm going to say now. Thank you for listening.
Family, friends, Your Honors, may it please the court. Thomas James Sexton was born in Sumner, Iowa on November 7, 1944. The second of 10 children of Joseph West and Mary Elaine Devine Sexton. His father was a veterinarian, and Tommy grew up on a farm south of town. He was raised to be self-sufficient with an intense, loving reverence and gratitude for family. He met Bee, the love of his life, in kindergarten. Later on in high school, Tom was elected senior class president, and Bee was the homecoming queen. He went on to Loras College in Dubuque, and Bee attended what is now known as Northern Iowa University in Cedar Falls. Tom would say their engagement, quote, was the luckiest day of this Irishman's life, quote. And they were married on July 30th of 1966. Tom attended Boston College Law School on a scholarship, and he was then drafted into the United States Army during the Vietnam War. He served in the JAG and was honorably discharged in 1971. Tom and Bee eventually made their way to St. Paul, where he practiced with Oppenheimer, Wolf, and Donnelly. His fellow associate and future law partner, Bob Weinstein, always felt that Tom was a trial attorney disguised as a corporate lawyer. He was very talented and an absolutely phenomenal rainmaker. In 1979, Tom and 5 other attorneys from Oppenheimer
including Sherman Winthrop and Bob Weinstein, took the leap to start their own law firm of Winthrop, Weinstein, and Sexton. This fledgling law firm has since grown to more than 180 lawyers over the ensuing 46 years. After getting the law firm off to a tremendous start, Tom moved on from practicing law to his next great endeavor. Ever the entrepreneur, he took yet another leap of faith, this time into the world of banking in Iowa and Minnesota. These banks and their employees treated their customers like family and enriched these towns in the finest traditions of community banking. He continued this work for the rest of his life. Tom was truly a man of letters, both figuratively and literally. He had a lifelong love for reading, a deep appreciation of literature, and a poet's gift for phrasing. I will always remember that Tom's beautifully handwritten and Lincoln-esque letters, bounding with his farm-bred common sense, were epic. His prolific correspondence could be varyingly profound, encouraging, or withering, but always memorable and pithy. And his letters to newspapers and magazine editors were legendary. Tom is survived by his wife, Beatrice, and their 3 children, Mark, Andrew, and Jennifer, their spouses, and 11 grandchildren. As his priest remarked, they were such a handsome family. Tom adored and loved them fiercely and with all his heart. Tom has left an enduring legacy that lives on through his family, his good works, and the many lasting memories of this good and wonderful man who showed us that every day is a gift. Respectfully submitted, Bob Weinstein, Steve Turek, and Tom Boyd.
I'm Tom Boyd, and I'm not as fleet of foot as I used to be, so I appreciate your patience. May it please the court, and good afternoon. It's my great privilege and honor to present this memorial for Patrick J. Sweeney. Patrick J. Sweeney was a dedicated attorney, a community leader, and a valued colleague. With over 30 years of legal experience, Pat made a lasting impact on the legal profession, his clients, and the communities that he served. His dedication to justice, professionalism, and mentorship earned him deep respect among his peers and those he represented. Pat attended college at St. John's University, where he was the captain of the tennis team. He then earned his law degree from William Mitchell College of Law. Pat's legal career began at Crass and Monroe, where he refined his skills in the public sector representation. In 1991, he joined his family's law firm, Sweeney, Boer, and Sweeney, and eventually became the managing partner of the firm in 1996. In 2016, Pat brought his expertise to the firm of Eckberg Lammers, where he continued to practice municipal law. His dedication and skill were recognized by his peers with an AV rating from Martindale and Hubble. Pat served as city attorney, as both civil municipal attorney and criminal prosecutor for
numerous municipalities, including Blaine, Little Canada, Circle Pines, North Oaks, Lino Lakes, and East Bethel. Pat played an integral role in municipal law, guiding local governments through complex legal challenges. His expertise in civil litigation, land use, contract negotiations, criminal prosecutions served his clients and his colleagues well. Beyond his professional achievements, Pat was a devoted father, grandfather, and friend. In his free time, Pat loved to play golf and to travel. Pat was preceded in death by his parents, Tom and Marguerite Sweeney. He is survived by his daughters, Mary, Margaret, and Molly, grandchildren, Charlotte and Grace, and siblings, Shannon, Bridget, and Michael, and his friend and the mother of his children, Elizabeth Sweeney. Pat is greatly missed and lives on in the hearts of his family and his many friends. Respectfully submitted, Joseph Murphy and Thomas Boyd.
If it please all the courts. My name is Steve Kirsch, and I'm honored to talk about Mike Swore. Chief Judge Gruing, I thought we ended at 5, so I'm going to have to really hustle this through. I've never been held in contempt of court either. So our dear friend Mike was born March 3, 1949 in Duluth and was raised in Virginia, Minnesota. He passed away on February 22, 2024 in Naples, Florida. Mike was a graduate of Virginia High School on the Iron Range. He received a BA from Hamline University in 1971 and a JD from William Mitchell College of Law in 1974, now Mitchell Hamline. Mike enjoyed a rewarding career practicing law in the state of Minnesota at Swore & Gatto. That small St. Paul firm single-handedly kept the billboard industry. Sorry about that. Mike was a magnificent traveler and adventurer and well known for his outstanding storytelling of his experience. They were entertaining, sarcastic, funny, and much of it true. Mike lived life with gusto and a let's-do-it kind of enthusiasm. Witty, funny, sarcastic, he kept you on your toes. He was a man of humility who never forgot where he came from. He was authentic, personable, and people who met him, you just liked them. And he was friends, and he really liked his lawyer friends, his peers, and hanging around and telling stories with lawyers, sort of like all of us do. Mike was always best dressed, donning color and style as an extension of his gregarious personality. He was extremely kind and generous. And did he love ice cream? I am an eyewitness to that, and I don't like my friends to eat ice cream alone. Those of us who knew him and observed him, he literally was always on the go. His energy level was set at maximum. He loved hunting, fishing, skiing, golf, and adventure. You just couldn't keep up with him. He got by with just a couple hours sleep. One of Mike's, traits would be he turned into Don Rickles on the golf course. And I couldn't tee off, hit a drive, putt, get out of the sand trap without at least 2 or 3 minutes of constructive criticism. Mike is preceded in death by his parents, Mitchell and Vida Swore. He's survived by his wife of 50 years, Gail, his daughter Stephanie Swore of Amsterdam, Netherlands, his daughter Megan, who married Wahid Olakin, and they reside in Mozambique, and beloved granddaughters Fadila and Ife. Mike is also survived by sister Cynthia Muriel and Carol swore, as well as many of his friends, relatives, and colleagues. In the spirit of Mike and his zest for life, plan a trip, play the back nine, invest in education, and make a difference. Once you met Mike Swore, you had a friend for life. He was loyal to his friends and family, and he shared with everybody his love of life. It was a life well lived. So Mike or Mikey, we all miss you, and we all love you. Respectfully submitted by Steve Kirsch and the Swore family.
Chief Judge Gruing, judges of the 2nd Judicial District, Judge Wright, Judge Brisboy, and my colleagues from the Court of Appeals. May it please the Court. My name is Jill Flaskamp-Halbrooks, and I have the pleasure today of coming to speak about my friend and former colleague, Judge Bruce Willis, with whom I served on the Court of Appeals for 18 years, if you count the time he worked with us as a senior judge following his active term. And it's my honor to be here this afternoon to just share a few remarks about Bruce and to present this memorial to the Ramsey County Bar. It is a short time. I'm only going to make a few remarks, but they are richly supplemented by the comments you'll see in the booklet that Beth Willis, Bruce's widow, has written. They go into great detail about their family life and more about Bruce's professional life than I'll be able to share with you today. But Bruce grew up on a farm west of Minneapolis. He graduated from Orono High School, Yale University, and Harvard Law School. And he then practiced law for 30 years at Popham Hague, specializing in commercial litigation and election law. He was appointed to the Court of Appeals in 1995 by Governor Arne Carlson. And what a wonderful addition he was to the court. Judge Harriet Lansing, who was one of the first 6 judges appointed by Governor Perpich to the Court of Appeals, has said that Bruce energized the Court of Appeals when he arrived, and the effort underway at that time to elevate the quality of the legal writing of the opinions. And it wasn't that the court wasn't interested in quality in their legal writing before Bruce arrived, but their mission, they felt, when they were first establishing and getting the court underway, was to really deal with the tremendous backlog of cases that justified the establishment of the court in 1983. So once that was taken care of, then the court felt like, all right, now we can shift focus to opinion writing and quality of opinion writing, and that did, in many respects, coincide with Bruce's arrival, which was a wonderful thing. He had a well-established reputation as a lawyer who had great analytical and writing skills, and he combined that with a very strong work ethic. He led by example with his own writing, but on the court, he also shared his expertise with the rest of us. He helped with Judge Toussaint to organize legal writing seminars. We still have a custom on the court of circulating opinions that other judges write before they're released, and it gives everybody an opportunity to review it and comment if they wish. And when you got opinions that had been reviewed by Bruce Willis back, you knew that you had some wonderful constructive criticism and also a lot of great detail. Bruce had the ability to see both the big picture in terms of the structure of an opinion and the analysis and the strength of it, and the small details. And he quickly became regarded as the court authority on grammar, punctuation, and all things hyphenated. He taught us all a lot. He was a person of tremendous integrity in his writing, and he understood that our judicial system at its core is fragile, and that it depends upon the public's trust and confidence in us and in the quality of our work. And so it's incumbent upon all of us judges and judicial personnel to do our utmost, our very best work that we can each and every day to build that trust and confidence. And he was resolute about his opinion writing. He made certain that the facts were accurate, that they were clearly stated, and that the law was fairly applied. Bruce's opinions are an indelible legacy in the Court of Appeals, and I really highly recommend them to all of you who are writers, because if you take the time to look at them, as with other wonderful legal writers, you'll see an overarching organizational and logical structure that can walk a new reader to a case through from beginning to end with an ability to understand it. You'll see the ability to tell a story. You'll see precision of language, short, effective sentences, and the ability to condense complex legal cases into clear statements and resolution. I'm just going to close with a brief anecdote. Not long after Bruce joined the court, he became acquainted with a person named Brian Garner. And Brian, as many of you probably know, is a very highly regarded expert in legal writing. I think Bruce met him at a seminar, and with their shared passion for writing, they became very good friends over time. When Brian would come to the Twin Cities to do legal seminars or to talk at law schools or to present perhaps and work with law firms, he always made time to get together with Bruce for coffee or for dinner. Brian, I'm told by Beth, often sought out Bruce's advice on issues, and they collaborated professionally, with Bruce contributing to at least one of Brian's volumes that he wrote. So when Brian was remarrying in 2010, he invited Bruce and Beth Willis to his wedding. It was to take place in a mansion on the ocean in Newport, Rhode Island. Sounds elegant, doesn't it? Fantastic. And so they went, and they had a wonderful time. That evening, they met and talked with Brian Garner's adult children, and then they also had a wonderful conversation with the officiant of the wedding, and that was Justice Antonin Scalia of the United States Supreme Court. So it was a very, very memorable night. Bruce has left a tremendous legacy for both the Court of Appeals and the legal profession. We were benefited immeasurably by his collegiality, by his humor, by his gifts, and by his generosity of himself and his talents. Bruce is sorely missed, but we're very fortunate that his remarkable legacy lives on. Respectfully submitted. Thank you.
On behalf of the Ramsey County judges and referees, I want to thank all of you for your attendance at this special court session. Please stay safe and healthy. The deputy will now call this special session to a close.
This special session of District Court is herewith adjourned. Have a good one, y'all.